Welcome to Eventful Endeavors, secrets to crafting the perfect celebration. If you're planning an event and looking for useful tips from industry experts, you're in the right place. So get ready to take some notes and we'll dive right in. This is Eventful Endeavors.
Hello, everybody. This is Alyssa from Felix and Fingers again, and I'm here today with Kaylee from Green Dress Planning. Thanks for being on here, Kaylee.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Kaylee is actually one of my best, I would say, friend vendors in the industry. We like to go work at coffee shops a lot together, and so I'm really excited to have her on here today. I'm going to start off. I want everybody to know, can you tell everybody why you're called Green Dress Planning?
Yeah, so I'm wearing a green dress today. I am a wedding planner and day of coordinator. And I wanted to start a planning business just to kind of go solo officially. And I got the name inspiration because I was actually at a wedding, and a lot of my rules entail of like brides and grooms not being allowed to answer questions on their wedding day because choice intoxication is real. And so I always ask them to redirect questions to me. And a lot of times vendors are hard to find, right? They're all in black and you're like, yep, go find that girl named Kaylee. But I was wearing a bright green dress that day instead of black. And they were just kept saying like, go find the girl in the green dress. And it made it really easy for me to find, or really easy for me to be found. And and it kind of stuck, and it was an available name and easy to spell and everything. And then I get to wear a green dress and have an excuse to buy really cute green dresses all the time.
I love that. As a vendor, I can definitely tell you that story is completely true because the amount of times they'd be like, go find so-and-so. And I'm like, I don't know who that is. And everybody looks the same. Everybody's all in black. So I love that. So yeah, amazing. So one of my first questions for you is, and I ask this most of our guests, but can you tell me about a favorite trend that you've seen recently? Because we know that the wedding industry is filled with trends. So what is something that you've seen recently that you really are enjoying?
That's a really hard one to narrow down just because there are so many like creative like nods to traditions. But one that I'm like really excited about is a non-traditional aisle / ceremony setup. Something as simple as switching the sides that the family sits on. Because so often like the bride's standing on this side and her family's here, and the other partner is on this side and their family's right there. But having the family members of the opposite sit across. So like, for example, if like me and my boyfriend got married, right? Having my family sit over here and his family sit over here, when you're facing in, you get to actually look at your family. Generally, it's really high emotion and you look for support. And I really like enjoy the thought of being able to look across and look at my siblings and look at my parents and my grandparents in those moments is really special. I've also seen a lot of people do like circular approaches to a seating of a ceremony. So instead of having it classic, like everyone sitting here facing forward, it's kind of surround and it's just the couple in the middle. That's really fun, giving people a little bit different view and not having to be behind a whole bunch of people. But there's a lot of different things that people can get really creative with the ceremony, and that's what I'm most excited about. I have a couple that's going to do a circular ceremony, and I'm like, oh, I'm so excited for it. So
I love that. I know
ceremonies are fun too.
I love it. My favorite thing as a wedding vendor is to like show up when they're doing something different and be like, I'm so excited because I've been wanting to do this for like years.
Yes.
Okay, so I have another question for you that is something that I get asked a lot as somebody in the wedding industry, and I wanted your take on it as well. But do you think, and I have a feeling that the answer is going to be yes, but do you think that hiring a planner or a day of coordinator is worth adjusting your budget and cutting back on other things, and why?
So I might be a little bit biased as a planner, but if I'm talking to all the brides and grooms in the world right now, yes, it is so worth adjusting your budget. Whether you work with me or you work with my coworker, my peer, whatever, like find someone. Planners and coordinators are a massive investment in your sanity, right? I talked about choice intoxication. It is real. Constantly making decisions, saying yes and no. In the moment might seem really simple, but towards the end of the day, after you've answered 150 questions, you just want to be done, right? You're just like, don't talk to me. I just want to be over it. And it always breaks my heart when couples say, like, we're just excited for it to be over. That's kind of the womp womp part of the wedding party planning. So being able to have someone to kind of offload a lot of that, the stressful aspects of it, is definitely worth the investment. I've never ever spoken to a couple that has regretted getting a coordinator, but I have spoken to many couples that have regretted not getting one. Yeah, you might be able to do your wedding and get away with not having one and it'd be totally fine. But what if it doesn't? What if something does come up and it does add extra stress that you don't need? The amount of people that are just over the moon with having someone totally outweighs the success rate of people that don't have one, in my opinion.
Absolutely. I completely agree with that. I see a big difference in couples at the end of the night who have somebody on their team who is like doing all the little things that really add up at the end of the day. And like you said, those little tiny decisions, even do you want the catering here or do you want the catering here? Like that can be something that when you've been asked that all day, the end of the day, you just see people being exhausted. So
yeah, I had a wedding the other day that
echo what you're saying enough.
Yeah, I had a wedding the other day and they had a parking situation and all of the guests were getting tickets. And yeah, and in that moment, the last thing that the bride and groom probably wanted to deal with was figuring out why people were getting tickets and getting that all taken care of, getting signage out there, getting in contact with those people when they're like in hair and makeup and getting dressed. So those are the kind of things that you really don't plan for and where having a coordinator is really going to make a difference.
Definitely. And I love that you talk so openly about the difference between having somebody that's planning your wedding and having somebody who is just there for day of coordination. Because I know for a lot of people, like they really like doing the DIY things. They really love the wedding planning process, but they don't know how to hand over the reins on the day of. So can you give any advice for anyone who's planning their own wedding, but is trying to hand off to a coordinator the day of, and how they can make their life and their coordinator's life as smooth as possible that day?
Yeah, I identify really strongly with those brides and grooms who are very DIY because as a planner and coordinator, I'm like always want to be in control. So like me trying to figure out how to be a planner and have my own wedding someday, right, is something that I always think about. And so that's what I really focus in on my packages, is really like finding that balance between like what you want to do and what you don't want to do, and then handing off those things. And the biggest thing with really heavily DIY couples is going to be decor. Oftentimes is the hardest aspect of more DIY. It's much more affordable. So I love the DIY concept. I am obsessed with saving money. But the biggest thing that I do is just having those really often consistent touch bases with your coordinator and making sure that you have all of your ducks really, really in a row. I had an amazing bride on October 27th, Addie. Her and Jordan both, I don't even know why I just say Addie, her and Jordan both were like over the moon. Best DIY couple I've ever worked with. I came in and Addie handed me a full like binder. She had everything in bins. Jordan like knew where everything was and they had everything labeled and everything. So it was super easy, right? Like I love the trick of the little, you can buy like a 10 pack of them at Target or Walmart, right? Of little plastic container bins, and they had it table 1, table 2, table 3, and they had a bin for each one. And I had all the votives for table 1 in there, all the votives for table 2, the table numbers, the name tents, all those things in each box for each table. And that was such a game changer. And having those bins pre-labeled so that at the end of the night when we had to put it away, or when they had to put it away, they were able to grab the bins that said table numbers and put all the table numbers back in that bin. So it was a really easy unload and reload versus like having all the votives in one spot and all the table numbers in one spot. Having them pre-organized table by table made such a huge difference, and really just going through and communicating with me leading up to the day of like, here's how we're going to be prepping. So the communication obviously is what it comes down to. And then organization is huge too.
I love that. So, question for you, because I know that I have a lot of clients that come to me who maybe haven't booked something yet. They haven't booked a photographer. They haven't booked a day of coordinator. I've even had people come who don't have a venue yet. So, do you have any advice on how far out each type of vendor should be booked, or maybe what order is a really good order that you see people booking in?
Yeah. This is a really interesting one to talk about, and I'm glad we're talking about it because a lot of timelines for booking vendors is changing, or a couple vendors that you really expect are like totally different. A really big one that I've noticed lately is hair and makeup. Hair and makeup is oftentimes a lot more expensive than people are expecting, and the timeline for booking those is a year plus out, especially if you have a very specific makeup artist in mind. So all of like if you have a wedding in October, like booking right now for hair and makeup in like November timeline is super, super reasonable, which I don't know, 5, 6 years ago, I don't think would have been the case. So I feel like doing a breakdown of the timelines for the different vendors is a good thing to talk about. But I think hair and makeup is a really, really big one that books out a lot farther than people are thinking. Venues have been pretty consistent in regards to booking timelines. Always kind of that year and a half out. I don't think that's a huge surprise for anyone. Same thing for like photographer. I don't think that one's a big surprise, but hair and makeup has been the big one. Coordinator can be very different from coordinator to coordinator. You have a lot of companies now that just like they're a company of coordinators, and you can probably book those not necessarily as far out, but then when you have much more like niche design coordinators, you do want to start looking at that like 8 to 12 months out. That's kind of where I'm at. Like I have weddings booked all the way until October of 2025, right? So a year, and then I've had those booked since June of this year. So we have a huge gap, and if you are looking for someone like a very specific person, you want to reach out as soon as possible. But if you're more open-minded, then the timeline's a little bit different.
I love that. So, can you tell me something? Because I know that we've talked about how different coordinators and different planners have different approaches and different things that they specialize in. What's something that you specialize in that is maybe different than other planners or coordinators?
I don't think it's necessarily like totally different, but it's something that I like to speak on a lot because there are different types of planners and different types of coordinators when it comes to events. There are a group of coordinators and planners that are very design focused and very creative and very like in general, like working on the aesthetic, excuse me, and things like that. And then there's the logistics planner, right? Making sure that all of the timelines and things are all being written out and executed. So what I really talk about pretty forwardly is that I'm very focused in on logistics planning. I have many creative bones in my body, and I love being creative, and I love design and aesthetic and everything. But ultimately, my bread and butter is logistics planning and making sure that we kind of have a full timeline and that it gets taken care of and executed. Very type A in that sense. So a lot of my couples come to me for help on like timelines. Like, do we do a first look or do we not do a first look? If we do a first look, how is that going to affect the timeline? And if we don't want to do a first look and it's really important to them, me working with them and getting creative on the timeline so that they can get exactly what they've always envisioned is something that I really, really like to spend my time doing as a coordinator versus only doing design. Obviously, I do provide input on design and things quite often as well, but I really, really, really enjoy the couple that's like, hey, I want to do this and I need to figure out how to make my timeline work. And that's where I get excited. And I'm like, yes, let's figure it out.
Yes. I know. I've often even, I feel like, asked you questions about timelines because I think that might be the hardest part in a wedding planning process is figuring out how many tables do you have? If you're doing a buffet, how long does it take to release all those tables? Those details are things that if you're not at weddings all the time, it's really hard to guess what that timeline is going to look like. And if it gets off, it can really throw off multiple things in a row. And so I think that's something that's just so important. And that is why I tell all my couples, I'm like, I think hiring a day of coordinator or a wedding planner is so worth it, because you don't want to be checking your watch the whole day trying to get through everything.
Yeah. And like when you are running behind, you want someone who is going to be there saying, we'll get it taken care of. I made this adjustment to make it work. Because it's impossible. It's virtually impossible to have a wedding that's perfectly on time the entire time. I have yet to see one. I've come very close to very closely executed weddings, but there's always going to be some sort of minute here, minute there. I had a wedding that they overestimated how much time they needed for photos. And that's a great problem to have. But then we had a situation like, what do this 18-person wedding party do for the next hour that we had set aside for photos? So kind of playing around with it and making the most of the time in those moments is huge.
I love that. Okay, I have one last question for you, and this is a question that I ask everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But what is the biggest piece of advice that you would give a freshly engaged couple who is just at the beginning of their wedding planning journey?
Oh, that is a big question. Other than the classic hire a coordinator and planner, because that obviously is a huge piece of advice that you will not regret. And if you start with that, you will build your budget around it and make it work. I would say if at any point you feel you have the need to say, I can't wait for this to be over, take a step back and reevaluate.
Ooh, that's such good advice.
The wedding isn't just about the day. It's about the experience of coordinating and planning it together to like have those experiences with your family and your friends and your future lifelong partner or your current lifelong partner. And the last thing you want is it to be a dreadful experience. And if you have those moments where you're like, oh my gosh, I am so ready for this to be done, that's a moment where it's like, okay, what's causing that? Is it a stress? Is there a stressor, right? I'm going to reach out to I always tell my clients, I'm like, if there's something that keeps you up at night and you're not going to go to sleep, text me. And I will tell you if it's worth being stressed out about and say like, okay, yeah, we should probably figure this out. Or I'll be like, girl, why are you even thinking about that? Dude, chill, right? And I can help you deprioritize that and come down and then be like, oh, okay, actually this wasn't that bad. But in those moments, it's like, okay, is it a wrong vendor match? Is there a vendor that is causing you way more stress than there needs to be? Then maybe we need to reevaluate to make sure that that's the best vendor match. Or if it is guest issues, right? Kind of seeking reassurance from your coordinator, as I'm going to keep plugging, going and getting that reassurance and double checking, I think is huge. Like, don't let wedding planning set the tone, or actually, no, let wedding planning set the tone for your marriage. And if it's starting to set a negative tone, let's work on it to fix it and make it a positive experience.
I love that. That's such good advice. Well, thank you so much, Kaylee, for joining us on the podcast today. Thank you, everyone who's watching or listening to this. Again, this is Alyssa with Felix and Fingers and Kaylee with Green Dress Planning. And thanks so much for listening. Bye, y'all.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Eventful Endeavors, Secrets to Crafting the Perfect Celebration. We hope to have left you with some actionable ideas for your own event. If you like the show, please subscribe and definitely leave us a review. We read every comment. So until next time, happy planning and see you soon on Eventful Endeavors.